chart. This is Shakespeare's upbringing. Let's start at the beginning. First, do you see this transition word? It's very clear that Shakespeare's upbringing and lack of education are why some think that William Shakespeare is a fraud. Of course, another transition word. Plays written under the name Shakespeare were written eloquently and with extensive knowledge of a person who had experience traveling and spending time with upper class citizens. However, wealthy families, literacy was not common among citizens of the time period, but simply reserved for the rather wealthy families of the time. Do you remember reading in your packet that he could not read, could he? So that was one of the suspicions. If he couldn't read, how could he write these? Therefore, Shakespeare being unable to write was not illogical. This just proved his poor upbringing. So it didn't really prove anything yet.
But he did learn to read though.
He did. However, just because you can't write doesn't mean that you can't tell and listen to stories. Does it require you to see a written word to tell somebody a joke or a story? No. It is incredibly likely that Shakespeare told his stories while using actors to play out his ideas and a literate scribe to record them. Using inference in that sentence, what do you think a scribe is?
Like a script?
Someone that could do the writing for him? Yeah, it's a person that can do it for
If
him.
he couldn't read, he just wanted to help other people that couldn't read. Like probably his
Right.
probably Francisco.
This might explain why Shakespeare even made up new words and phrases, because he didn't have the education to come up with existing words to tell his stories, so he just made words up. Pretty good imagination, right?
Are those words now?
Yeah.
In addition, we do use those words now. Shakespeare, being an actor amongst a variety of social classes, may have listened to the stories of the rich and used this information to help him sculpt the pages of his plays. Therefore, being illiterate has no dwelling on a person's ability to dream in words. You see how this paragraph right here, the last sentence ties all the way back to talk about his upbringing. We have a lot of evidence in here and it's highlighted, but then we tie it back with that closing remark, right? So each sentence has to follow time and your whole paper has to follow time. Body 2, we want to talk about his signature now. So in your flow chart, under the second I, we would write signature if that was going to be the evidence that we were proving. Aside from his illiterate upbringing, this is our topic that we're introducing. There's also very little found to justify that he wrote it all. Here we go. Highlight this yellow because this is the topic of this sentence. Scoot it up so you can see it.
We don't even have the paper.
You don't have this paper. I'm just kind of showing you quickly. This would make perfect sense if the above was true, that Shakespeare indeed had a scribe and used his spoken language to record his plays. Guys, this is a teacher-written example of the kind of work we would expect from you, okay? So this is giving you ideas on how your paper should look. The text seems to believe that the signatures found have nothing to do with his work in the theater, and they vary from one signature to the next. So there seems to be some inconsistencies in the way people think he signed things. Now, depending on, like me, I just had finger surgery. I may sign things a little bit differently right now with a stiff finger. Maybe he injured himself or cut a finger. If you think it was really Shakespeare and they're arguing that his signatures didn't match, maybe you could provide some details of possibilities. Why would his signatures be different? Okay? Something to think about.
Oh, just saying we should have been in.
All right, another transition word. However, the varying signatures of William Shakespeare also do not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Shakespeare isn't who he says he is. If Shakespeare couldn't write, there's a chance that he had other literate people possibly a variety of different people sign his name for him. If he did sign his name in the 6 samples given, there are many reasons one might write differently. Having to use the non-dominant hand, being rushed, the quality of the quill he was using to sign with. Remember, these weren't just regular markers and ink pens. His signature alone does not clearly prove that he did not, in fact, write the 39 plays he claimed to have written. So here we go, tying it back to our original thought, following the tie process. Do you see how each paragraph, we give evidence, but then we make a statement tying it back to the beginning? All right, our third paragraph in the body, we're going to discuss Christopher Marlowe because someone suggested in our packet that it could be Christopher Marlowe writing as William Shakespeare, correct? That is a possible person that wrote as Shakespeare. In addition to Shakespeare's upbringing and the evidence of surrounding his inability to write legibly, there is a theory that Christopher Marlowe is, in fact, Shakespeare. So here's our topic sentence. That's what we're introducing in this paragraph. That's what would be on the third I on our flowchart if this was the evidence we were providing. Although, another transition words, and you guys have a page full of transition word ideas in your binders. There is a compelling argument about Christopher Marlowe's death after being accused of heresy, which we know is punishable by death in this time period, and possibly changing his identity in order to avoid this punishment. So, some people say he was Christopher Marlowe, but they convicted him of a crime that was punishable by death, so in order to escape that, he changed his name. Do we think that's plausible?
Yeah, because
Yes.
then if he changed his name.
Then if he changed his name, where did all the work go, right? There's no consistency. But if you're arguing that he didn't live, or if he did live, this is a detail you may want to pay attention to. Rylan.
Why don't they just go back on other people's writing work and see if they made words like he did?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to compare in that history. So depending on which side you choose, you need to look at those details and inspect for yourself. It seems quite unlikely that he did that, but what seems more likely is that Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare worked together. Since Marlowe was pegged as a brilliant playwright and poet, who better for Shakespeare to learn the ropes from than a mentor who is great at their trade? So what if Christopher Marlowe was just someone that he worked with and learned from? That would be a mentor, right? If Shakespeare did learn from Marlowe, it's highly likely that Shakespeare would incorporate mockery and criticism of the monarch and question their policies within his play. Right, because he came from the poor working class. Do you think he's going to do everything that the monarchy does and all of their behaviors? That's not his lifestyle, is it? Even if, another transition, even if this was not completely from Marlowe, Shakespeare may have had criticisms of his own simply because during the time of the Renaissance and Reformation, it was more widely accepted to think more freely about the world and the policies within it. In addition, more transition words on each sentence, guys. In comparison of Marlowe's works to Shakespeare, there is no question that his writing style was significantly different than that of Shakespeare. So there's no way that Marlowe is actually Shakespeare. Does that convince you yet? So notice, this is going to tie back to this paragraph about Miss Christopher Marlowe, right? We're taking this final sentence, that's our ending and tied. That's our E. What, Remy?
He could have purposely wrote different.
They're purposely wrote, oh, that's a good thought. He could have purposely written it differently.
So the law couldn't catch on and enforce the death penalty.
Right? He may have intended to make it look different so people thought it was a different person. That's a good theory.
So he wanted to be like a mystery.
A mystery, Maddox?
Is Miss Fagel gonna be here?
Yeah. All right, so in our conclusion, we need a strong paragraph. Remember, tide follows every paragraph, but it follows your whole paper. So your final paragraph is going to be that E. It's going to be the ending that ties back to your topic paragraph. So you should have 5 paragraphs in this persuasive essay. 1 for your topic, 3 for your supporting evidence, and 1 for your ending. Your supporting evidence will have the ID in each paragraph, your evidence, and then your details, which say more.
Stop it.
All right, in your conclusions, you're going to revisit, and we also want to leave our readers with a thought. Make them think. Make them wonder. Do they agree with you? Do they not agree with you? Xander?
Who's gonna read it?
I'm going to read it. Are you going to convince me? Are you going to make me think about it?
Yep. Nope.
Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and The Tempest, to name a few, have a distinct quality about them. Remember, we're going to go back and we're going to revisit that topic paragraph. When you see a play with vulgarity, romance, a lot of death, and Elizabethan-style language, you know without a doubt that it is a Shakespeare who wrote it, that it was Shakespeare. Although, another transition word, there is evidence to support Shakespeare's existence isn't real. The same evidence can also support why he is. We're still confused, aren't we?
Yeah.
So, the question remains, is it more important to know that the name of the man who wrote these ingenious plays is actually named William Shakespeare, or that a brilliant man who goes by William Shakespeare authored such brilliant plays that we are still reading centuries later? Not only are we still reading them, we're basing movies on them. Remember, we discussed The Lion King is based loosely on the play, what? What was the play?
Hamlet.
Hamlet. Yeah, and there are a lot of versions of Romeo and Juliet out there. So, your process of power. In the, you stop that.